if you've heard of idioms before, especially if you've learned English as a second language, or I guess maybe even learned any second language, you may have heard of an idiom as an expression that has a difference between the literal and the figurative or non-literal meanings of the words. So for instance, kick the bucket. So to literally kick the bucket would be to kick a bucket, right? It's a bucket on the ground, I kick it. But there's a figurative meaning. There's a meaning that's not just contained in the words themselves. To kick the bucket also means to die. And you can't necessarily get that just from the meanings of the words, right? There's nothing about the words themselves that tell you that that should mean to die. Same thing with spill the beans. Spill the beans, it means literally to spill beans, say, on the floor or on the table. But it also means to kind of gossip or talk about something, or to, reveal something, right, that maybe shouldn't have been revealed. Right? So it has a non-literal or figurative meaning. Now that's what generally idioms mean, but that's not really what we're talking about for the SAT. On the SAT, when we talk about idioms and idiom errors, we're talking about the certain word combinations, constructions, etc., that are what the SAT people call idiomatic, while others are not, or while others are known as unidiomatic. And indeed, if you look at the official explanations that the SAT gives for the questions, they'll use this terminology. They'll say such and such is idiomatic, such and such is unidiomatic. And really all they're saying there is that some combinations of words in the English language are correct and others are incorrect, and there's no real reason beyond that's just the way it is. Right? So there's just some combinations of words that go together, and that's how it is. So this can be especially tough for non-native speakers because these constructions are things you pick up over many years of speaking and reading and listening to the language. So it's kind of hard to memorize them, but at least if you're aware that they're here, and even for native speakers, sometimes this can be tricky because it's very, if we're speaking naturally, we might have no problem. But then if we stop and think about it, then we all get confused because we're looking for the reasons why. But there are no reasons why these things go together. It just is. So let's look at the three examples, three kinds of idioms we're going to see on the SAT. The first is prepositional idioms. And these are the most common. These are the most kind of common idiom errors you're going to see. And it's things like this. So listen to. We listen to records. We listen to music. We listen to our parents. We listen to whoever. We don't listen at. We don't listen by. We don't listen, well, we might listen for, but, we don't listen at something. Like, I don't listen at the music. That doesn't make sense, right? We say listen to because it's idiomatic. It's just the two words that go together. Again, it's prepositional, so we're looking at a preposition going with some other word. Preoccupied with. I'm preoccupied with this. I'm preoccupied with the SAT. I'm preoccupied with my math test. I'm preoccupied with whatever, right? So that's the words I say. I don't say preoccupied at or preoccupied on. I say preoccupied with. Why? Who knows? That's just the way it is. Same thing with capable of. I'm capable of something. I'm not capable at something or capable by something. It's just capable of. So those are some prepositional idioms, and we'll see examples of this in the SAT Grammar Tactics series. Verb forms is another example of of an idiom error, and it's actually kind of related in some ways to prepositional idioms. So for instance, when we decide to do something, we decide to do something. So decide to compete, decide to listen, whatever it might be, right? We don't say, I decided competing. We don't say that. We say, I decided to compete. Whereas with suggested, we say, I suggested walking to the store. Not technically, I suggested to walk. It's suggested with the ing. So I suggested building, or I suggested to, not I suggested to build. So again, verb form, it's the difference between the ing ending of the verb versus the infinitive, which is to plus the verb. And we'll actually look at some examples of that in the Grammar Tactics series and probably elsewhere. The last kind of idiom, which is not really, I guess, an idiom, but we'll call it one, is the word pair. So these are correlative conjunctions. We'll have a whole video on this later, but these are things like not only, but also, neither nor. They just go together because that's the way it is. So again, there are no rules or reasons why an idiom is the way it is. They're expressions, they're phrasings that just come along with the English language, and they got to be learned. And really, there's something that you can learn over time as you speak, read, write, and listen. So as I said before, most native speakers know the proper idioms. As long as you don't overthink it, you kind of trust your instincts, your knowledge, you should be okay on most of these. Non-native speakers might benefit then, or however, from looking at some kind of idiom word list. Only to a point, though, because there's some diminishing returns when it comes down to that. So you could Google SAT idioms, you could find lists, but you got to be careful. Don't spend a lot of time on this because it's unlikely the College Board is going to repeat old errors, right? If they use an error on one test, why would they repeat it? They'll just find some other kind of prepositional idiom or other idiom to use on the next. So memorizing word lists and idiom lists has only limited usefulness. Same kind of thing with vocabulary, which I talk about elsewhere. So instead, just train yourself to be on the lookout for idiom errors. Know they're there. When you see a preposition, pay attention. Know that this error can appear. And when you're evaluating questions, just keep that in mind. And again, we'll talk more about this in SAT Grammar Tactics. Okay, next video.